So without a doubt, you know that the pandemic for almost 2 years ago has been the worst thing that can happen to the average gym goers, especially those that do not have their own home gym, their own full sets of weight plates that they can stack up, a full squat rack, or probably even a pull-up bar that they can take advantage of, especially when the gyms have closed. So especially those who are dedicated to their craft, getting huge numbers on the big compound lifts, specifically the big three, the squat, bench, and deadlift. But in my case, the bench was my weakest. And during the 2 year lockdown, it made me realize that the appreciation of embracing the struggle, the nasty and slow process of training as an actual lifter. So how did it occur that my supposedly weak bench press got even stronger without me myself using any type of weighted resistance for those two prolonged dreaded years during the lockdown? So in this video, I will be explaining the methods, principles, and mistakes I did pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and in this year of 2022. So first off, during the pre-pandemic phase, as you would know, as a newbie slash beginner, you'd probably be making the mistake of just showing up in the gym. You just lift weights without intentions or plan ahead of time, because that's me, obviously, because I'm the topic on this video, and then go home thinking you did enough to look like your goal physique, more specifically. Then in my case, of course, I fell into the trap that after years of experimenting, choosing exercise variations that fit into my preference and taste via time efficiency, my anthropometry, effectiveness, so I can be in and out of the gym as quickly as possible. But the problem was, I was still a dogmatic fool. I only did barbell movements, no isolation whatsoever, and if I ever did one, I would half-ass it or probably skip it entirely for the day. So it affected my lifts drastically, and those lifts that are specifically targeted for having a bigger bench press has also affected some of my other big compound movements and even the weighted calisthenics variations. So I got weak, like extremely weak, because added in the fact that I was quote-unquote man gaining, the so-called dreaded man gaining, in which Revival Fitness has the term novice purgatory, which I was also one of the victims pre-pandemic. So I was super anxious that if I ever decided to bulk up, my abs would probably disappear. But from experience, at the current time, because I am bulking as well, my abs are still defined, probably not that chiseled or shredded as compared to those that are probably on a single-digit fat rate, like this crazy calisthenics street workout athletes you see on Europe, probably even in Asia. So that's why probably I'll make another future video about my body dysmorphia and how you can combat it based on my experience. So back to the original topic, and in fact, I thought that I would get away with not doing isolations, especially at my shoulders, because probably thinking that is also a big part of my mistake. Is I think I could get away with it, because if I did what these genetic outliers or genetic freaks did, then probably I would also get away in not doing isolation. And of course, that has affected me very, very negatively in my goals of achieving huge numbers on the big lifts, especially the bench press. And now I know the importance of training the key muscles in such big lifts to achieve such great numbers. And that would be the next mistake that I did, is, of course, as I've been making a point in this past few minutes, is I did neglect my isolation, and in turn, of course, I stayed small and become weaker. And because of that, my quote-unquote isolated muscles that cannot be targeted by the barbell, the big movements, the big barbell movements alone, got weaker, like my side delt, the rear delts, my triceps, even the biceps and forearms. That helps in the big lifts. That because, of course, if you have a big forearms and big biceps, they have the tendency to become stronger. And when you are doing those big movements, those big barbell movements, grip strength and grip endurance is very important, and it's a key component, especially if you are a competitive strength athlete, aka a powerlifter or a strongman. So added in the fact that you can perform the lift at the correct bar path. And then the point is that I was thinking I could get away with not doing isolation exercises, as I am already doing barbell movements, in which I was said that probably the point is that I was not thinking in doing isolation exercises, because as a newbie or a novice, you are told that doing barbell movements you would do the most bang out of your buck in that type of scenario, especially when you are not that privileged in spending more than an hour lifting at the gym. And mind you, I was also a busy student because I was a freshman in college, and by the time I was at the gym, it was past sunset, so I have to be home before it was too late by the nighttime. So I only did barbell lifts, maybe add in some weighted calisthenics because it looks cool and fun. Let's be honest. I mean, if you can probably do a chin-up or a pull-up with 245s, you're probably strong on your upper body. But added in the fact that I get too bored easily if I only did barbell movements. So what happened is my lifts plateaued easily, and it was at an early rate. I still neglected the signs and only added in more sets, especially on the overhead barbell press. Looking 2 to 3 years ago, I would have never thought that I could bang out 100 reps on the overhead barbell press, because I was not moving past 70 pounds and I was mentally demotivated all the time whenever I did my upper body push day. And at the point that I skipped doing the lift altogether, which is a huge mistake. If you want a huge number on your barbell bench press, you should also be doing some kind of overhead pushing movement, even if it is seated, because those are complementary exercises in which you can grow bigger boulder shoulders, and in turn you can probably achieve a stronger barbell bench press with those boulder shoulders you've grown with the overhead pressing movements. So, and after that, this all turned into a snowball effect, wherein my bench press was also affected drastically. At the time, I thought I was stuck with just 125 pounds on the barbell bench press, and one time I remembered I nearly crushed myself with the weight, and I had to ask for a spotter to lift it up back again and re-rack it. So that was one of my most embarrassing moments as an novice in the gym. So my plan to refix this during the 2-year hiatus, which happened from the start of the lockdown from March 2020 up until last year, I was stuck with only doing bodyweight exercises. Although it was enough for me to fix my bad habits indirectly from my own thought, because what I did is, during those 2 years of lockdown, probably crossed over the big weighted movements. So my first exercise that I did during the pandemic is the deficit pike push-up. So how could I not thank Alex from Alpha Destiny enough for sharing this exercise variation and information on setting one up at home. Although his variation was a chest to wall with 2 plyometric apparatus, I used our dining table as the base and set up my feet up the staircase and cranked out as many repetitions as I can. This in turn gave the front delts and triceps enough stimulus to strengthen for the past 2 years and help my shoulder joint mobility and flexibility whenever I do overhead pressing movements. And another thing is the deficit push-ups, emphasizing the stretch on the bottom part of the movement, thus stimulating muscle growth and strength. And next thing I did is calisthenic skill work. And you might be thinking, how does calisthenic skill work equate to getting strong in the big lifts? So here goes. I am a huge fan of doing handstands, even at a young age. Although I probably achieved one for 5 seconds with probably decent to trash form, but the thing is, I was a huge fan of calisthenics, especially when I was starting, because all these anime workouts just involving just doing bodyweight movements, animes like Dragon Ball, One Punch Man, you name it. I was a huge fan of calisthenics before weightlifting. Believe me or not. So you can also check my old video about doing handstand training for a year. Added in the fact that you need to strengthen the whole core for balance and stability. Your trap added in the fact that you need to strengthen the whole core for balance and stability, your traps, and this create tension throughout your body when performing a handstand hold. And as you can also think of it, the handstand hold is the bodyweight counterpart of a barbell overhead static carry. So for me at least, this carried over big press-up movements like the barbell bench press and overhead barbell press. Next would be doing isolation. So after all these years for being a dogmatic fool, I was enforced to stay at home and do not have the access to endless amounts of equipment at the gym. So I was only stuck with using my brother's pair of 10-pound dumbbells. And yes, those pair of lightweight dumbbells helped me grow my boulder shoulders of this year. And I just did the time-tested and effective exercises in growing your shoulders. Most likely, lateral raises, skiers where you perform a rowing-like motion, but your focus is at the posterior delts. Probably the rhomboids and a little bit of the traps too. My front delts were getting smoked by doing the pike and normal push-ups alone, but I was still doing front raises as to isolate. And the goal of isolation is, of course, the name itself, to isolate your targeted muscle as much as possible. And as you can see now, the endless and 1,000 reps of doing elevations has been worth it. My deltoids have been noticeably bigger than before. Even my peers have been mentioning how wide I am compared to before, especially during the pre-pandemic where I was maintaining, so I can keep and maintain my abs instead of progressing on the big compound movements by bulking. And then lastly, for what I did after having access to training in the weight room, I was patient enough to stick around in doing a specific exercise variation. So let me explain. I have been only doing 2 variations in my overhead pressing and 2 variations at the barbell bench press. And the goal is for you to stick around as long as possible until you plateaued or got bored from doing so, and then you can rotate on another exercise variation that is probably very similar in movement, or very similar in targeting, very similar in what muscle you are targeting. This, of course, create adaptations on the central nervous system and not just on the muscles alone. Obviously, you also strengthen the joints and tendons. So in the future, your body would be ready if you ever maxed out on the big compound movements. So that would be all. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up or not. I do not care as long as it boosts the algorithm. Subscribe if you're not. Comment down below what are your thoughts are. Share your experiences on how you managed to get past through a plateau, or what did you do to maintain your muscle and strength during the peak of the lockdown. So as always, thank you for watching and have a good day.